and go.
All right. I'm Armin Elfston. Mundanely, I'm James Bushell. I've been doing Viking feasts for about 8 years now. We do an annual feast uh, at the Swedish Club or the Swedish Cultural Center. Done feasts for the Nordic Heritage Museum, a couple of feasts for SCA. Um, I've served a lot of Viking food to a lot of people. Um, so that's the background on where I'm coming from with doing this. Most of the feasts that I've done are actually fundraisers, and so there's going to be a chunk of this at looking at food costing and how to make your fundraiser an actual fundraiser that makes money. Because that's when you're trying to raise funds, that's really the bottom line is you need things to make it so that the organization that you're trying to support is actually functioning and that everybody that comes to it are also very happy. I'm going to go through, I'll just give you kind of the outline on where we're going to go. We're going to start out with the most basic part, which is the kitchen in which you're going to be cooking this feast. And then once you have that information, we're going to go down into service planning on how we're going to actually serve the feast, and then move into budgeting, how to figure out how much people are going to pay for it and how much we are then going to be able to spend and still have a return that meets the needs of why we're doing this. With that information, then we'll move down into menu planning, and that is looking at a whole bunch of factors that you're going to have to put into how you make a menu. Like, do we have allergies? What people are we serving? Then going into actual recipe development and suggestions on recipes and dishes that I suggest you serve that people have either really enjoyed or really easy to make, have a good value for cost to serve. And then we're going to go through the prep schedule and how to make it so that feast day is easy and as lovely as possible and not stressful, and everything comes out on time and everyone is happy. And then we're going to go into the actual feast day scheduling, how to put together what's going to happen on that day. And then finally, we're going to do some recipes and some Q&A, because I don't know exactly what everyone wants to know. So starting out, knowing your kitchen. Everybody does a feast at a different place. When you're in the SCA, a lot of times you're doing feasts at a site that you've been to before, that you do over and over again. Sometimes you're going out and you're looking for a commercial kitchen or a rental space, and that's where you're going to do your feast. I highly, highly recommend that is the first thing that you do with any feast planning. If you do not plan your feast around your ability to cook it, sadness is going to come in. And my goal is to make it so that everybody is happy and there is as little opportunity for sadness as possible. So go into wherever this kitchen space is, look at your stovetops. How many burners do you have? How far apart are your burners? What size pots are you going to be able to put onto it? Does this kitchen have ovens? How many ovens are there? Turn the ovens on. Find out if the ovens work. You're also going to be doing this on the day of the feast. As soon as you get there, first thing you do, turn on all the burners, turn on all the ovens, make sure it actually works. How much refrigeration space do you have? Do you have one little refrigerator? Are you going to have to bring in coolers and have stuff living in coolers? Do you have a beautiful, lovely walk-in and you're going to be able to do a bunch of cold dishes out of it and prep things up and all of their trays and everything and have it good to go? Makes a big difference. Look at your counter space. Do we have a wide open counter space? Is everything kind of compact? Are we going to have to bring in some tables and set them up somewhere else in the site in order to do prep or to do food service setup? or is there enough room in this kitchen just to do everything? Counter space is huge. And then make sure that you check with the place that you're renting with and find out what is included. Does this place have a dishwasher? Does the dishwasher come with sanitizer? Do you have to bring in your own? Most places will provide their sanitizer because they don't want you to screw up their dishwasher. Some places don't have a dishwasher, and I avoid those places because that sucks. Also check and see what cookware is provided. I've worked in some kitchens that it's bring your own pans. Everything is bring your own. They provide nothing. They have counters, they have sinks, they have hot things, they have refrigerators. So everything else you have to bring. And then I've worked in other places that have hotel pans and carboys and warmers and just beautiful equipment that makes your day fantastic. Mark all of that down and keep a list of what you're going to have to bring and what is provided. And we're going to use that basis in order to plan our menu and what we're going to make. So once you know what your kitchen looks like, then you need to figure out what your service is going to look like. If you're doing a full-on traditional Scandinavian feast, it's going to be multiple days, and there's always going to be food, and people are going to be coming and getting it. There's other things going on, and there's a larger feast at night, which is just more food, but there's never not food. This is not something that ever gets done because it's not in our culture. So usually you're going to be looking at either a buffet style service where your guests are going to come up, get their food, and then go back to their seats, or you're going to have table service where people are bringing the food out to your guests. And then there's a couple of ways that might work. You could be plating and bringing plated food out to your guests, and that can go out in waves. Or it's family style where you bring out serving dishes of the food, it goes to the table, people kind of serve themselves, but it's broken up. Do you have people that are bringing those out, or are you going to have people at the tables come up and get them? This is, in SCA, this is all classic stuff. When you get into the non-SCA world, your guests understand the system less so. And so you usually have to either do buffet or served. And then you need to look at what your staging area is going to look like. You don't want to stage in the kitchen. Staging in the kitchen is going to get in the way of whatever your next course is, unless you're putting everything out as one massive course. Look at where your tables are going to be. Look at where your servers are going to come through. If you're doing a buffet, look at how your people flow is going to work. Can you do 2 lines with the same thing and then have them come out? Do you need to come down the middle and then have them go out? Having that plan before you actually put together any other bit of your meal is just going to make feast day so much easier. Figuring out if you're going to put it out in courses. Are you going to have something out on the table, bring something else out, bring something else out? How many courses are we going to run through? How long is this feast going to last? Make sure that question is answered. Finding out or deciding who is in charge of service. I cook. I love my kitchen. People in my kitchen love me. I do not do service. I try really, really hard not to be in service, and then find somebody that's really good at that job, and then be incredibly nice to them and love them so much, because they will be in charge of all of that food going from the kitchen to my guests to make the guests all incredibly happy, while I'm in the kitchen making the food so it can go out to the guests so that then they can be happy. And it just works really well if there's that wall. because if there's not, and I'm in my kitchen trying to make it so the food comes out, and there's a disaster going on in the service, and I have to leave the kitchen in order to do the service, that's going to just make everything else back up. And we're avoiding sadness, so we're going to just avoid that sadness and have someone else be in charge. And then we need to look at what kind of servingware is available. This goes back to, are there bowls and serving spoons and such that we are renting from the site, or are the bowls and servingware and such stuff that we are bringing onto site from our stock? Once you have all of that together, then you get to work on budgeting. So now we know how our feast is going to be served. We know about how many people we're going to be able to fit into the site. Then we need to look at what our audience is and what their pain point for paying for a feast is. When we're doing SCA feasts, a lot of times that is where people that are in our barony or our kingdom, where it's going to be accessible to the most people possible. When you're doing a fundraiser, it is, what is the most we can charge in order to sell all of the seats, but not sell them too fast? There's some other social issues going on in there, but it's a different number. And then take what your budget's going to be, take the number of people that you're going to have, and I like to break it down by how much food cost I'm going to have per person. Because then if I need to flex the numbers, if we didn't sell as many seats, or if somebody sold an extra 20 and didn't tell you about it, and then things happen, you can actually do that math and flex it in an easier way. Spreadsheets are your friend. And always throw on an extra 15 to 25%, because that's the shit happens money. And if you're under budget, there is never anybody that is going to complain. If you're over budget, there are people that will complain. If you're doing this as a fundraiser, going over budget, every bit that you go over budget is money that is not going to the cause that you're trying to support. So you do want to estimate high and then make sure that it's going to work, that all of the costs involved in renting the place, getting the food. If you have to pay your people, with SCA, it's fantastic. We get lots of free labor. Most nonprofits, you also are working with volunteers, which is that curse and a blessing of they are cheap and they're also volunteers. Be nice to your volunteers. Then once you know what your budget is, you know how you're serving it, you know where you're going to cook it, you have to get down into your menu planning. And the first thing you want to look at is, are there special diets that you're going to be working with? I've done feasts that do IBS, vegan, and gluten-free in the same feast. And then what I think you should do, and there's different people that have ideas on this, is when you're doing the food, make sure that anybody that has any of the restricted diets that you are catering to can eat 2/3 of the food. There is going to be some things they cannot eat. Personally, I don't make replacements for those things. That's things you cannot eat. There's other people that aren't going to be eating other things, but everybody's going to be able to eat 2/3 of the things, and it's going to have a filling and full experience. And it makes everybody feel like they're having the same thing, and everybody is special, but they're not being treated any differently, and everybody is eating together. And it has worked out well for me. There might be some people that don't like that much, but it's easier. And then if you're doing multiple courses, you really want to pick a protein, a starch, and an accent for each course. You could have multiple accents, you can have multiple proteins, but there really should be something that is a protein, a starch, and an accent. And that's not 100% correct for Viking cuisine. We don't know what Vikings ate, but the people that we're serving are going to be happier with that kind of a spread. And also make sure that there is a protein, a starch, and an accent for everybody that is in any of those restricted diet categories. They may be missing one on each of the courses, but they need to make sure that if they cannot eat a protein that is on the first course, that there is a protein that they can eat on the second course. It's just you can't skip multiple ones. That makes people sad, and we don't want sadness. And then look at your prep, and now it's time to start a spreadsheet of what dishes you're going to make and what that prep looks like and how that can end up going in the oven. And we're going to use that when we're doing recipe development. With Scandinavian food, there aren't really a lot of recipes. I guess you can find some online. Usually I'm writing recipes specifically for the feast every time. So this might be weird. And it might not be what everybody does. But this is kind of the fun part. So Viking food is not all, the vast majority of Viking food is boiled or simmered. So everything is going to end up in a pot with some kind of liquid in some way. Now, you can fake that in an oven by putting it in a hotel pan, sealing it up, and shoving it in the oven, and then cooking it that way with steam. Or you can do the pot on the stove. Large pots on the stove, you need to stir all the time. They get tricky. If you can start a dish on the stove and then move it into an oven, that gives you a little bit more flexibility in both holding and in oven space, and you don't have to have somebody stirring so it doesn't burn on the bottom. So the easiest thing to cook in the oven, and what every Viking feast should have, is a grot or a porridge. If you're playing porridge drinking game, you have to drink a lot. This is the most common Viking age food. It's delicious. It's endlessly versatile, and it's also super cheap. So it hits everything that you want for a feast. And then look at your vegetables. We're going to be eating a lot of cabbage. We're going to be eating some kale. We're going to be eating some alliums, either leeks or onions. When you're looking at costing, onions are way cheaper than leeks. Both of them work really well. We want to get some butter. We need to pick out our meats and what kind of budget we have for them. The budget for pork or for chicken is different than the budget for lamb or for beef. And then you can kind of fudge it a little bit by when you're going to serve this, and then give people smaller portions of more expensive foods when you're towards the end of your feast and they're more full, and then front load it with poultry or with some pork or something like that is generally a good idea. For a Viking feast, it really isn't a Viking feast without fish. Fish gets trickier because it's more expensive and it's more difficult to come by in many areas. We're mostly on the West Coast here. We live in a wonderland of fish. We've got great cod. We have wonderful salmon. You can make gravlax. Cod porridge is one of the best things that you'll probably ever eat. these are some easy dishes, and depending on your kitchen, gravlax you're going to prep, and it just goes in the fridge and gets sliced. It's like a free dish. Look at appetizers, things that you might put out before. I like doing that with the gravlax or doing that with cheeses. And then looking at your desserts. Put all of this stuff on a spreadsheet, everything kind of like a wish list of what you would like, and then go through your wish list and spread your wish list out for courses, and then go through your wish list and spread things out for cost, and then get rid of the things that you can't have. And then that will shrink your wish list down, and then go through your wish list and look at what is required to cook each thing. Does this need to be a pot on the stove? Does this need a pan in the oven? How long does this take? And then move them around in your course directory based on what that kitchen looks like and how you can get things into the oven. And then once you have that, you have your actual menu. And we're going to then go into, I've done a lot of classes. So once you have what you're going to serve, then you need recipes for each thing. Scandinavian early cuisine is different than most because there's not the easy recipes. I will give you some easy recipes, so I guess you could skip this step. But then you have to write out what is actually going to be in each dish. And I recommend doing that on a spreadsheet, putting every item that's in the recipe down, how much of that item is going to be in each. I generally break them into 20s. So how much will serve 20 people, and then do them in chunks of 20 people, because that's eventually we're going to break it down into like per person cost, but figuring out what your quantity of, mustard seed for one person is just, it's not a happy day. But for 20 people, it makes it pretty simple, and then you can squish it from there. So once you have all of that in your spreadsheet, then it's time to work on prep scheduling. The key to having an easy and successful feast day is to do as much as possible, as soon as possible, and make sure that you have the storage space in order to put it in places. With Viking food, the easiest thing to feed people is smoked meat. If you have a smoker, you can make that yourself, and it's really easy. You do have to brine it and then smoke it for 3 days, and then put it in some kind of refrigeration somewhere. When I'm doing feasts, I usually start this process about a month, sometimes a month and a half ahead of time, just so that I can buy whatever it is I'm getting on sale, because I'm a cheap bastard. And if you have some flexibility, you can get a better value on your beef, and you can afford lamb and that sort of thing. I smoke that in a barrel smoker. You can smoke that in an electric smoker. The key is you want to keep the temperature down, so like around 150 degrees, and then just let it go for 3 days, and it'll dry out. And it's an easy to store product, and it's great for feasts. Put that away. The next thing you'll make is, if you're doing gravlax, or, oh, I missed one thing. If you're making your own pickles, you need to think about 3 months in advance. Lacto-fermented pickles just take time, and I'm not an expert pickler, but when I've been making turnip pickles, and onion pickles, and beet pickles and that sort of thing, it takes like 3 months for the lacto fermentation to get them to where they're tasty pickles. But those also store anywhere because they're pickles. Dairy fermentation, If you can make your own skyr instead of buying skyr, you're going to have better ingredients. You're going to have way better skyr. You're going to get a whole bunch of leftover whey that you're going to use for the rest of your feast. And it's super cheap and it's super easy. These are all things that I find very attractive in making a feast. So you can do it in your Instant Pot. If you just do a gallon a day, 5 gallons of milk will make enough. A gallon of milk makes enough skyr for about 25 people. If you're not just feeding them skyr, if you're just feeding them skyrish things. So that takes about a week. And this is all done ahead of time. Then when you have that prep done, you're going to go over all of your list of all of your ingredients, put together a packing list, and then you're going to put on them, this I need to buy the day of, this I can buy before. I don't have the refrigeration space to buy all of my things before the feast, so there is always a big chunk of refrigeration that I just let the stores do. So put together your packing list, what you need to buy the day of, what you're going to have. Always remember to put in like Ziploc bags, or if you have 4 billion cottage cheese containers, put those in, because there's leftovers. You can send people home with them, makes them super happy. Nobody ever brings to-go containers or little bags, and if you have them, then the cleanup is a snap. You just tell people that if they help clean up, then they get to take food home, and ta-da, it happens. Okay, and then we get down to feast day planning itself. So this is more spreadsheets. So this is, I wake up in the morning is on the top. And then at the bottom is I get to go home at night. And then you just go by every hour what you're going to be doing. Get up, get my poop in a group, get in the car, go to the storage area, pick up whatever goes in the storage area, go to the store, buy all the stuff that we need from the store, pack in, time for pack in. After pack in, always put in about a 15-minute break, because shit happens, and it never works the way it should. And then go through in 15-minute increments and write down what you're prepping, what is going into an oven, what is coming out of an oven, and when something is leaving the kitchen and being served. And if you have those things down, then your service is going to go very smooth. So it's what you're prepping, what's going into the oven, what comes out of the oven or pot, and what is being served. And that is that schedule will make life better. It also allows you to have that little bit of flex time when you're like a half an hour before you're ready to serve, and then you get word that you're going to be serving a half an hour later than that, and you need to change it. So that flexibility is really, really good. The easiest way to work on that is start with your service time and then work backwards. So you generally know when you're serving. If you're serving your feast at 6, then work backwards on when something's going to have to go in the oven, when that is going to have to be prepped, and chunk your way backwards from that. Because the only time that you really know, well, you hope you know, is service. And so know when you're packing in, know when your service is, work backwards. If working backwards and you get to your prep time overlaps your pack in time, then you got to change some stuff, because it's better to know now than to know on the day of the feast. Double check everything. Put in every hour snack and water breaks. If you don't put in your schedule that everyone needs to drink water and eat snacks, they will not eat snacks and they will not drink water, and then your staff is going to be sad. And we don't like sad staff, and we don't like people passing out. And that people is usually me, because I am really not good at remembering that. If it's on the list and it's announced loudly, people drink their water, people eat their snacks, and everybody has a better time. So that's basic feast planning. I'm going to go through a slideshow. This is the last Leif Erikson Day feast that we did at the Swedish Club. Now, this was in October, and so it is COVID time. So the kitchen had the added extra fun of we could only have 3 people in it with masks. We were all very spread out, one person over here, one person here, one person here. And service was all to go in to-go containers. So it's a little bit of an oddity, but as far as challenge level goes, it was probably the other feasts are easier. I've not had any feasts that I only could have 3 people cooking in my kitchen, and that nobody could go out with the service. Just a second here to see if share this. Okay, so this is at the Swedish Cultural Center, and the Swedish Cultural Center has a fantastic kitchen. They have a lot of flat tops. They only have 4 burners, and they are all on one stove. And then they have 4 ovens. So we're really good on ovens. We're really good on flat top space. And with burners, we are kind of having a rough time. It does have a dishwasher. There is a huge prep area, which is really nice. And so this is the start of making the beef. That would be the first thing that you're going to do on your normal Viking feast, because that takes the longest time. This is a bunch of whey in a, I don't remember how big this pot is. It's a big ass pot. It's like 12 gallons or something like that. It's enormous. So the whey goes in, fire that up. It's going to take a while to cook that. We start throwing in the beef. There's a beef in there. It's hard to see. As the water starts coming up to temperature, there's some more beef going in. If you look in the back, then we have the prep table going, and there's somebody that's cutting up the onions, throwing those in the bags. Oh, those are carrots. Somebody's cutting up carrots and throwing those in the bags. I found that if you're doing vegetable prep, if you have Ziploc bags and you just, anytime you can do the vegetable prep, you do the vegetable prep. If you get extra volunteers that come in and they're like, hey, what can I do? Hey, would you like to cut up some carrots? Hey, would you like to cut up 50 pounds of onions? That's a harder ask. But there's a lot of people that will say yes, and it's a simple thing to do. So this is the beginning of our feast as we're starting to put the dried beef into the pots. And then we skipped way ahead apparently. So we have all those flat tops, and so we serve a bunch of barley cakes. Barley cakes are really easy to batch out on a flat grill. So there was one person flattening out flat cakes and another person frying up flat cakes. And those we did ahead. Oh, we're going backwards. So this is how you mix them up. Flatbread is something that pretty much everybody expects when they go to a Viking feast. It is barley cakes. It's kind of, it's iconic as far as what Viking food is. When I make it, I like to start with boiled whole grain, and then add stone ground or hand ground flour if I can get it. This gives you an interesting texture, and it's also way easier to make. And then you roll them into a ball and then flatten them out, and you can cook a bunch of little flat cakes fast if you've got a flat top. If you do not have a flat top, I do not recommend doing flatbreads for your feast. I have done them for a feast on pans, and we ended up getting child labor doing them, and doing enough flatbreads to make it so that you could feed, I think we were only feeding like 100 people or even less than that. And it took like 6 hours. This was for 150 people, and it took like an hour because we have a big ass flat top. And that goes back to know your kitchen. I have no idea what I'm doing here. Oh, I'm making leek butter, and okay. So leek butter is a recipe that I will put on the Google Drive. It's not a hard recipe. It is 1 pound of leeks, 1 pound of butter, and then you scale it up depending on how many people you want. You need about 1 ounce per person as a topping, and you cut up all the leeks, and then you melt the butter, and you throw all the leeks in the butter, and then you wait, and you just put it on low and let it cook for about 2-3 hours. And when all of the liquid has been cooked out of the leeks, and you just have this buttery, leaky, golden goodness sauce, then you're done. And that sauce, you can put it on any of your Viking food, and you could put it on stuff you found on the floor, and it doesn't matter. That just makes everything awesome. It's like if garlic bread was even better and was like leaky bread butter. It's magic. It is super, super good. I put it on the meat. I put it on the grat. You can put it on the flatbread. There's nothing that you can't put leek butter on. Eat more leek butter. There's the meat going back in. Little pig. This is a Viking charcuterie plate. So this is dry smoked lamb. Kind of comes out like a lamb prosciutto, except it's salted, smoked, and then it has caraway and mustard is the flavoring on it. It's pretty salty. The gravlax is over on the other side. There's just a little deal of nuts and berries, and the other container that does not have nuts and berries in it has a bunch of pickles. And then that bit in the middle is skyr that has been pressed for 2 days. So if you put I cheated, I don't have a cheese mold. So it just went into a colander with a cloth and then flattened and pressed for 2 days. And it makes a nice mild cheese. There's no salt in the cheese. It's just skyr. So it's only sour and creamy, but it pairs well with the salty items, which is the pickles are salty, the lamb is salty, and the gravlax is salty. And then this is served with the flatbread. So you get some butter, you get some cheese, some flatbread, and all of these things, and it's a great meal. This also, in smaller quantities, makes a fantastic first course. When everybody is coming in, if we are not in COVID times, you can put this out on the tables, and people have something that they can eat as soon as they get there. And it's something that's fairly recognizable. It's a charcuterie plate. People know what pickles are. People are very familiar with cured meat and with lox and with cheese. And with very little explanation, they can figure out that you're supposed to put it on the flatbread. So this makes a wonderful, wonderful first course, and it gives you that one thing that you really, really want in a feast, and that it buys you time. People sitting at a table have this, and they're pretty happy. Oh yeah, the chopped leeks stay in the butter. They pretty much dissolve. You just end up and you use greens and whites. If you're doing an IBS diet, you want to cut some of the greens and put them aside. Leek greens qualify for IBS diet. The whites are not. And then make some leek butter that is just with the greens. Also, I like to save some of the leek greens to put in with green greens so that I can have an IBS qualified other dishes as well. It's an easy trick. If you can separate your whites from your greens, it gives you two paths in your feast. This is a close-up. So there's a little bit of coriander on the cheese just to kind of make it interesting. This is the beef boiling away. I have not found that it matters that much after you've smoked it, salted it, dried it, and boiled it back up. Really what cut that beef started out as. It all kind of turns into a similar thing. Brisket works really well. You want to trim some of the fat because it gets too fatty. Sirloin works. Chuck works. I've done it with ribeye. That's a waste of money. It doesn't taste any better than chuck. So when you do the beef, use a cheap cut. You can use anything, but it's not going to make anybody happier if it's something else, because it's just, once you've ruined it like 3 times, it's gonna come out the same. This is everything. These are our prep area. If you have refrigeration and you can prep things like this makes everything simple. So all of this ended up being done probably 4 hours before we had anybody coming for service. And we knew exactly how many of each meal that we were preparing because people signed up for it before, which is weird for me on a feast. Usually you have to kind of fudge it and kind of have an idea on what people are going to eat of what. But this was the only thing that was really nice about this feast is we knew exactly how many of each kind of meal that we had orders for, and then we cooked like 4 extras of each of them, and then a little bit extra so that we could give some to our volunteers, and we had so little. Yeah, no Wagyu grat. Wagyu grat is not going to make you happy. And this is a close-up of I had somebody that was helping put these together that made these very pretty, and that's salmon in a rose, which probably is not something that the Vikings did, but if you can make salmon in a rose, people are pretty happy with salmon in a rose. This is us or me stirring up all of the porridge, and because basically the barley cakes are whole grain barley porridge mixed with grain flour. And this is a close-up of what they want. You want them to be very thin. You can see the grains in there of each grain of barley. And if your barley cake is the thickness of 1 grain of barley, that will make it cook the fastest. And also, if it's too thick, when it dries, it's too hard and you can't actually bite it. The thin ones make it so that it's easiest to eat. The mouthfeel is better. It holds up. If you get it too thin, then you get holes in it and you can't put a spread on it. This seems to be the correct size. I usually make them, if you start out with about a golf ball size roll of dough and flatten it out, it'll make about a 3-inch diameter barley cake. And that's us cheating and using a kitchen or a blender to make grain instead of children. This is the leek butter. So this is the leek butter almost done. It still has some bubbles coming up. And so all of the liquid has not come out of those leeks yet. So you give it a stir every once in a while and you just put it on low and just kind of pretend it's not there. You have to stir it about once every 15, 20 minutes just so that you don't burn the leeks to the bottom. And you want it on very, very low. You're not frying the leeks. We're just simmering them in butter, like butter poaching the leeks until they googe up and fall apart. And this is our neeps and carrots. Doing a root vegetable dish is also really simple. It makes people happy. I usually also mix it in as a kind of gratin, it's more Viking appropriate. Vikings did not roast a bunch of things. They didn't have ovens. And so you're looking at either boiling this or sticking in the oven and steaming it. And they would have boiled it in a liquid. And if you then throw a little bit of grain in there to kind of thicken up that liquid that you're cooking your vegetables in, it holds it all together, makes it kind of have a sauce and makes it a better complete dish. And it's also easier to make and easier to serve. So I think I've got, oh, this is the beef once it comes out. So once the beef is done, it takes about 3 hours. And then we pull it out. I always tie it with string. It holds it together a little bit better. It holds it together when you're doing the smoking, and then it makes it easier to get it out of the pot as well, because this is it's fall apart tender. And then I usually stick it onto hotel pans, shove it into a warm oven, and it sits there until we need to serve it. It's one of those things that you can just have stand for up to probably 2 hours. That gives you some flexibility in your feast. It makes it so that you can serve more people with fewer volunteers. That's my fancy ass clay pot that I pretend is soapstone. It's the closest I have. It's really, really thick stoneware. It's also magical, and you can put that pot on a hot stove and dump ice water in it, and it's cool. It doesn't explode. It's fine. And this is the beef after it's been cooked. The best use I have found for these silly glove things, the silicone ones, is slicing really hot meat. I don't use them for much else. They're good for fishing things out of boiling liquid and for holding on to super hot meat. But for slicing fresh out of boiling way meat, there's nothing better than these silicone gloves. And that's more leek butter. Okay, and then this is one of our vegetarian dishes. So this is those neeps and, what happened to my picture? Sorry. I'm assuming that people can see it. My Zoom did something weird. So this is the neeps and the carrots and broad beans. Broad beans are the main legume of broad beans, and field peas are your two legumes of Viking age cooking. Broad beans are huge. They taste meaty. You do need to soak them overnight, or you can cheat and put them into an Instant Pot for about an hour and a half to 2 hours, depending on how big your broad beans are, so that you can have that. And it's the best vegetarian protein you can do. And then you make a dish of broad beans and field peas and tubers. Put in some coriander, If you're serving vegans, you have to go non-Viking age. Viking age does not really have any fats that they use that were not animal-based. Lard, butter, seal, and just preserved pork is your main fats that you're using. So if I'm serving vegans, I usually use olive oil, just because it's a good oil and you're faking it at this point anyway. So you want some fat in that just to make it good. This is the greens. So I like to serve up.
Sorry to interrupt real quick, but we actually cannot see the pictures anymore.
Oh, what the hell? Hey, can my host give me my screen sharing back? Host.
I'm here.
Just say participants can share screens and nobody else share screens.
Why is it? I'm sorry. Hang on a second.
That's okay. Well, what you're going to be looking at is greens. So Viking age greens were mostly brassica, but they hadn't bred them into cabbages and kale and broccoli and cauliflower and such yet. So I usually just combine all of those together back into a pot and then make it into a Viking age greens. So you cut up a bunch of kale. That goes into, if you're not doing vegan, I put it into whey. If you are doing vegan, you put it into some salted water with some olive oil. If you're not doing even vegetarian, the best thing you can put in there is duck fat and duck stock, and then it's like the best thing ever.
It's still not working, and I don't know why.
Okay. Well, we'll just won't do pictures anymore. You just have to look at my smiling face and listen to my crap. We're almost done too, I think.
Yeah, we are.
Okay, so, and I don't have this all up on the shared drive yet, but I will get it there. So the greens, you cut up a bunch of kale. You cut up, or you just buy cabbage already cut up. Makes life way easier. You can also buy kale already cut up in large bags, also way easier. Put the kale in, let the kale cook for about a half an hour first, because kale takes a bit to get happy. With all of those leek greens, if you're doing IBS, and then just before you're ready to serve, about 10 minutes, put all your cabbage in, because you don't want your cabbage to overcook. Overcooked cabbage is not good food. Perfectly cooked cabbage is delicious food. Stir that in, and then put in whatever the fat is you're doing, put in some salt, and then that comes out. And it's a really good green. If you'd like it to be a little bit spicier, put in some mustard greens too. And it all works out well. And I'll get you some recipes. I had a week that didn't go as I'd planned, so I didn't have them up yet, but I just need to pull them and put them up. Do we have any questions? Because I think we're pretty much about done.
Yes, please. I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
When you were talking earlier about your magic ceramic pot, that reminded me of earlier in one of your other classes, you talked about cooking on stone. And we debated that quite a bit. Would a pizza stone work?
A pizza stone would be a really good similarity. It would be a great proximity, because all you're looking for is something that holds heat, and that you can put something on that's flat. And a pizza stone would be perfect for that.
Most of the other stuff we discussed isn't available laying around in my countryside.
Yeah, there's nothing easy to grab. You can sometimes get granite slabs that you can just at garden stores and such that they use for like walking pods. I live in Seattle and there's a place just called Stoneworks and you can get all sorts of stone there, but it's not everywhere has awesome things like that.
Yeah, no.
Yeah,
Okay.
you're looking for something, and just as long as you're not using a river rock, you just want to make sure it does not have water in it. If you're not sure, you can put it next to the fire and just don't be by it. I mean, watch your fire. Don't let your fire get away, but don't sit by your rock when you're finding out if it'll heat up and dry.
Good
Because
point.
some of them explode quite dramatically.
Good point. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing how to prepare a Viking Age feast.